Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, consider subscribing. It really helps keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now, sit back, relax, and let's get into the story. They say leadership is about making hard decisions when no one else can. That night, I learned just how hard those decisions could be. My name is Daniel Mirov. I'm 35, a former Ukrainian emergency response coordinator from Kharkiv. Before everything changed, I worked logistics at a multinational humanitarian NGO. I was trained to organize chaos, medical dispatches during air raids, food runs in blackout zones and refugee corridors. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for what began at 0 o'clock hours on June 21st. We were gathered in the underground parking structure of the Yuzhny retail complex. It was our main forward logistics depot, just outside the city center. Reinforced concrete, diesel generator, several loading ramps, perfect for coordination during air alerts. That night, I was doing routine checks with my assistant, Vika Soroka. She was former Army logistics, smart, sharp, and probably the only one in our outfit who could override my plans without irritating me. I had just finished calibrating a Starlink terminal near the storage lockers when the first alert came over our Zello emergency channel. It was a garbled voice. Local police frequencies had been quiet for hours, but this came from a civilian responder. They're not stopping, biting everyone. Petrovskoho Street, lock yourselves in, then screaming, a few seconds of chaos, then nothing. Vika stared at me. Did he say biting? I nodded slowly, trying to process it. Could be code, maybe a psychotic breakdown. Meth, flaka, something synthetic. Let's not jump to conclusions. But within minutes, multiple channels lit up. Calls from street medics, neighborhood guards, even an armored patrol from the 92nd Mechanized Brigade that had been helping clear debris in Saltivka. All reporting the same madness. People attacking others, ignoring injuries, tearing through police like paper. By 0:30, our internal network had over 30 active incident reports. By 0:45, all civilian lines went dead. Kiev HQ had gone dark. Something was spreading, and fast. I called everyone into the parking level conference space, 15 of us in total. NGO staff, local volunteers, and 2 armed security contractors. Andriy Kulik, a former border guard, and Jamal Atalay, a Turkish national who had worked with me in Syria and later in Azerbaijan. Jamal carried a Vector R5 rifle from his last job. Andriy had an old Fort 221 carbine and a Makarov pistol. We have a potential Category 4 civil disorder, I began. Mass psychosis or synthetic drug reaction is the working assumption, but injuries aren't stopping them. People are being bitten and turning. I didn't use the word zombie. I wasn't ready to. We hold here until we understand what we're dealing with. No one leaves alone. No panic, no broadcasts until we verify what's happening. Is the outer gate secure? Vika checked her tablet. Steel shutters locked, ramp entrance welded shut from the last drill. We're sealed. Then we hold. That was my first command of the night. By 1:10, everything went to hell. A red Kia Cerato slammed into our main service door, blowing out one of the interior locks. We heard it before we saw it, screeching tires, shattering glass, and a woman screaming. Andriy and Jamal moved fast, guns drawn, taking position behind an overturned delivery crate. The automatic doors had jammed open just enough for the bloodied driver to crawl through. She was middle-aged, maybe 45, still in nightwear, arms gashed open. "They're everywhere," she screamed. "They tore my husband apart, help me." I rushed forward, but Vika blocked me. "Check her for bites first," she said flatly. The woman heard her and started crying. I'm not sick, I swear." She wasn't bitten, but she wasn't safe either. 3 figures emerged through the shattered frame behind her, 2 men and a child. But their gait was wrong. Limping, twitching, moving like joints had no friction. And then I saw their eyes. No expression, no awareness, just fixed, glassy hunger. Jamal didn't wait. He fired 2 shots. The first round caught the larger man square in the chest. It barely slowed him. The second hit the child in the leg. He fell, but started crawling forward like a disjointed insect. "Headshots!" Andrew shouted. "Only headshots work!" The child's skull snapped backward as Andrew landed a round clean through the eye socket. The creature went still immediately. The other man fell seconds later as Jamal adjusted aim. The third, the smaller one, kept coming until he was physically tackled and pinned by a metal cart that 2 of our volunteers slammed into him. His arms clawed at the air, mouth frothing, jaw twitching unnaturally. We didn't kill that one. We locked him in a metal equipment cage. He kept snarling through the bars like an animal for hours. That's how we confirmed the infection. At 1:40, I gave the second order. Establish a hard perimeter and inventory all weapons. We had 2 long rifles, Fort 221, Vector R5, 4 pistols, Makarov PM, Glock 17, 2 privately owned CZP-07S, several tactical knives, 12 Molotovs from a protest supply cache, 1 12-gauge shotgun, TOS 106, with just 11 shells, 4 ballistic vests, several trauma kits, 2 VHF handheld radios, an unarmed drone with thermal camera. We weren't soldiers, but we could hold. I tasked Vika with securing the internal stairwells. Jamal and Andrew would alternate on surveillance with the drone. Everyone else was assigned to one of 4 fireteam pods: med support, supply logistics, mechanical, or observation. At 2 o'clock, we sent the drone up. The footage almost made me drop the controller. The streets of Kharkiv looked like a battlefield. Fires burned unchecked near the university district. An ambulance was overturned on Pushkinska Street. Civilians ran through the night pursued by staggering, blood-covered figures that looked more dead than alive. Most horrifying? Several bodies that had been still just minutes earlier stood up and resumed pursuit. We tracked one group, 3 infected, breaking into a dormitory window. Screams followed, then silence, then movement inside the building. More infected. That's when I understood it wasn't an outbreak. It was an ignition. By 2:30, we had our first breach. A team member named Dima, 19, intern, quiet, kept mostly to himself, went missing from his post by the generator bay. We found his flashlight on the ground, blood on the wall, but no body. Before I could process what happened, I heard a scream from the mechanical corridor. The hallway lights flickered. An old generator bug, and when they returned, Dima was standing there. But he was wrong. Pale, slack-jawed, blood down his chin, his right hand twitching like it was remembering motion. He stared at us for 2 full seconds before charging. It took 4 shots to bring him down. Jamal hesitated. "He was one of ours," he said softly. I nodded once. "And now, he's one of them." We sealed the corridor with a fire door and began rotating watches every 20 minutes. No one was allowed to go alone anywhere, not even the restroom. By 2:55, radio traffic indicated total collapse. The military fallback point at Pavlov Pole had gone silent. The metro entrances were being overrun. Several army units switched to encrypted signals, then disappeared entirely. I stood in the back hallway near the drone monitor, hands gripping the metal railing, watching static replace the last known position of a mechanized unit we had been tracking near Heroiv-Pratsy Street. That was our last hope for organized military response within the city. If they were gone, then we were on our own. The streets were no longer contested. They were lost. Behind me, the tension in the logistics room was growing thicker. Half-whispered conversations about evacuation were starting to pick up. Volunteers were asking each other how far their families lived, if the roads east were clear, if trains might still be running. The naive questions people asked when they still clung to the idea of outside help. I knew better. I had seen this kind of disintegration before in Donbas, in Aleppo, but those were man-made disasters. This was an erasure. At 3:05, I gathered everyone again. There were 13 of us now. We had lost Dima, and one of the warehouse techs, a young woman named Olena, had a nervous breakdown and had to be sedated after seeing what was left of Dima's body. She kept repeating the same words in a whisper. He was still warm. Still warm. I laid the map of the city on the table and circled 3 fallback zones. The first was school number 17 near Botanichny Sad, a hardened Cold War-era structure used as a civil defense shelter. The second was a water-pumping substation near Zhuravlivka, reinforced and previously used during flooding. The third was the KZHK tram depot in Industrialny district with underground maintenance access. It had iron gates and thick concrete plus backup fuel tanks. All 3 had drawbacks. The school might already be overcrowded or breached. The water substation had no proper heating or food stores. The tram depot was far, at least 5 kilometers through semi-exposed ground, but it had potential. I told the team plainly, we will not survive another breach here. We have 2 hours before this place is compromised. We move before dawn. No one objected. The fear had taken care of that. We began preparing for exfiltration in 2 groups. Group A, led by Vika and Jamal, would scout the eastern corridor and secure a vehicle from the underground loading dock on the opposite block, connected through a service tunnel. Group B, my group, would stay and prep supplies, food, medicine, weapons, and any cold weather gear we could grab. Kharkiv nights were still dipping near 10 degrees Celsius. Exposure was a silent killer. At 3:35, Group A disappeared into the tunnel. The corridor was narrow, lightless, and lined with the rusted pipes that leaked condensation. It ran beneath the former Metrocash warehouse across the street. We had used it before to move pallets during air raids. I trusted Vika to lead it. Her military background and mechanical sense gave her a cool, surgical approach to these things. We waited. 10 minutes passed, then 15. At 3:51, their signal blinked on the radio. A static burst, followed by Vika's voice, tight but calm. We reached the garage, found 2 vehicles, a Sprinter cargo van and a Hyundai Tucson. Both have fuel. No activity above, but glass broken. Jamal checking rooftops. We'll start hot wiring. I responded with a short acknowledgement and told them to keep engines cold until we had visual contact. Heat signatures and sound drew the infected like flies. At 4:05, we had everything loaded and staged near the secondary fire exit. We carried what we could in sealed crates: iodine tablets, tourniquets, radio batteries, glucose sachets, canned beans, tactical belts, bolt cutters, pry bars. I had 2 backpacks strapped over each shoulder and a collapsible solar blanket rolled into my coat sleeve. We opened the fire door in silence, crouching low. A sharp breeze hit us full of burned plastic and something else: decay, copper, and a hint of stagnant water. The block outside looked like a graveyard for machines. Cars sat half-melted where fires had torn through. Windows were blown out. Streetlights flickered overhead. powered by failing municipal grid lines. The sound of distant growling, too animal to be human, drifted down the broken avenue. Somewhere far off, I heard a siren wind down into silence. Vika's team emerged from the alley near the garage, shadows moving like ghosts between wrecks. They signaled us forward. No contact yet. We moved fast, disciplined, crouched behind wreckage and hugging the wall. No one spoke. We split into both vehicles with Group A in the Tucson and my group in the Sprinter. Jamal took point, rifle resting on the dash, scanning for movement. I kept my Glock drawn, muzzle down. We started moving at 4:25. Navigating through northern Kharkiv was like threading a needle in a thunderstorm. We used back roads, courtyards, tram lines, avoiding major intersections and any high ground where we might be seen. Vika had studied a topographic overlay of the city. She steered us through alleyways even I didn't know existed. At 4:37, we encountered our first roadblock near a housing block in the 522nd district. A municipal bus lay across the street, engine compartment torn open, tires burned down to metal. Next to it, 6 bodies sprawled in the median, motionless but facing the same direction, arms limp at their sides. One of them twitched. We didn't stop. We reversed through a service road behind a dental clinic and drove through a narrow pedestrian promenade. It cost us time, but it kept us alive. At 4:50, we neared the tram depot. It was a grim, gray complex surrounded by iron fencing and a 3-meter concrete wall. In peacetime, the place was used to house and repair electric trams, but since 2022 it had been semi-militarized during shelling raids, turned into a fuel and storage depot for backup power units. We parked the vehicles behind a reinforced tool shed and approached the main gate on foot. Andri and Jamal took positions on elevated concrete to cover us. We had to cut the chains, but the gate opened with only a dull groan. No alarms, no movement inside. We entered cautiously. The depot was enormous, littered with half-disassembled trams, forklifts, and wheeled diesel generators the size of cargo vans. Dust covered everything. A dead silence hung over the area, so complete it was almost unnatural. We cleared the first 2 buildings in silence. Then we found it. A small reinforced break room inside the underground repair corridor, with metal doors, running water from a gravity-fed tank, and a dry storage closet full of canned vegetables and pasta packets. There were signs of earlier occupancy: wrappers, 3 disposable phones, a blood-stained scarf, but no people. We took it. At 5:15, I called everyone into the maintenance bay. We now had 170 minutes left until full daylight. The infected were more aggressive in low-light conditions. We had seen that already. But dawn wouldn't save us. It would only reveal how many of them there really were. I laid out our next objectives: fortify the perimeter, create kill zones at both entrance points, and test the workshop doors for any locking weaknesses. Vika and I would reprogram the frequency hopping signal on the radio drone to look for survivors using short-pulse SOS bursts. We were going to stay alive. Not just survive, but resist. As the sky began to pale beyond the ruined industrial skyline, I sat in the corner of that cold, oil-stained room, staring at a photo someone had left on the workbench. A family of 4, smiling in a summer park. All gone now. Maybe turned, maybe eaten, maybe worse. I couldn't look away. There was something about the simplicity of the photo. The father's hand resting lightly on his son's shoulder. The way the mother's head leaned against his. 1,000 small details that no longer existed. They were like fossils now. Traces of the last peaceful hours before the world had changed. My hands were still shaking slightly, not from fear, but from a creeping realization. No matter what we did, we weren't getting the world back the way it was. This wasn't temporary. It was the new order. At 6:10, the light in the depot shifted, the gray of pre-dawn leaking in through the upper vents and cracked windows. I rose, brushing the dust from my sleeves, and joined the others in the tram maintenance corridor. The cold concrete underfoot, littered with metal shavings and stained rags, felt more like a bunker than a shelter, but it had held through the night. That alone made it invaluable. Vika had taken over our makeshift command post, a folding table beneath a faded electrical schematic. She was already reviewing drone footage and logging survivor beacon pings on a printed map. We had detected at least 4 distinct SOS bursts between 5:30 and 6 o'clock, all within a 2.5-kilometer radius. 2 were short, likely automated emergency beacons for medical backpacks or police terminals. The other 2 were manual pulses, rhythmically sent, deliberate and human. One from a fire station near Moskovsky Avenue, and another from a collapsed supermarket near Barabashova Market. It wasn't a question of whether we should respond. It was a question of how. Every sortie outside the perimeter risked exposure, ambush, or worse. But I knew what silence bred. Hopelessness spread faster than infection. At 6:20, I made the call. We would attempt a recon mission to the closer signal, the supermarket. The drone had already given us partial visuals of the area. Heavy smoke, a burnt-out trolley bus, a partially collapsed roof structure, and at least 3 dozen infected shambling near the parking lot. But the signal wasn't inside the main building. It came from the underground delivery ramp, which was still intact. Someone was down there. Maybe alone, maybe injured, maybe about to give up. I chose a 3-person team for the operation. Myself, Jamal, and a new volunteer named Maxim, who had military police training and had joined us after fleeing the city's north sector just before dawn. He had a calm demeanor and a practical attitude, and more importantly, he could drive under pressure. Vika protested at first, arguing I should stay to coordinate fallback planning, but I couldn't ask people to risk themselves if I wasn't willing to do the same. We departed at 6:35, taking the Hyundai Tucson. The cargo van stayed behind as fallback transport in case the depot was overrun. Jamal drove while I scanned side streets using the drone feed on a portable screen. Maxim rode shotgun, his Iwi Masada pistol sitting loose on his lap. We kept our route southbound, avoiding arterial roads and crossing smaller industrial lanes. Smoke blurred the morning air, not from fires close by, but from deeper in the city, where the skyline pulsed with destruction. Kharkiv had always been loud. Horns, trams, people shouting across courtyards. But now it was soundless, except for the occasional crack of glass or an inhuman shriek echoing through the buildings. The emptiness made the world feel hollow, like a stage set after the actors had gone. We arrived near the supermarket around 6:50. From the elevated tram line overlooking the lot, we surveyed the area through binoculars. The infected moved slowly in a wide circular pattern across the parking area. Their movements lacked coordination, like they were driven by stimulus and nothing else, reacting to noise, heat, or vibration. Some stumbled into debris or walked in loops. Others simply stood, heads twitching slightly, as if they were listening for something just out of reach. We waited several minutes, timing their patterns. Then, using a side ramp partially blocked by trash bins and a tipped scooter, we moved in. Jamal covered the front, Maxim took the rear. I carried the bolt cutters and a backup flare gun. We advanced low, crouched, staying within shadows and structural blind spots. At 7:05, we reached the delivery ramp. The steel roll-up door had been reinforced with stacked shelves and what looked like parts of a disassembled service elevator. A small gap near the base allowed us to see light flickering from beneath. Firelight, or possibly a candle. I tapped the door 3 times, paused, then tapped twice more. Nothing. Then, the faint sound of metal being dragged. Someone was inside. Slowly, a hand appeared through the gap, followed by a voice, dry and shaking. "How many of you?" "3," I answered, keeping my voice level. "Non-infected, armed, you sent the beacon?" A pause. Then a soft reply. "I didn't know anyone would come." The makeshift barricade was drawn back just enough for a narrow entry. We slipped through one by one and resealed it behind us. Inside was a cramped, darkened storage corridor lit by a tea candle balanced on an upturned food can. A woman sat cross-legged on a folded tarp, wrapped in a military-issue poncho. Late 20s, pale, bruised on her left cheek. A bloodied fire axe rested beside her. "My name's Nadia," she said. "I was a paramedic. I got separated. Been down here since midnight." She hadn't eaten in at least 12 hours. Her radio was battery drained, her flashlight cracked, but she was unbitten and lucid. We gave her water, a ration bar, and checked her for signs of trauma. She had barricaded herself in when her convoy escort had been attacked near the bus stop. Only 2 of them had survived the initial assault. The other, a man named Roman, had bled out beside her 4 hours earlier. We couldn't stay. The infected had begun clustering again near the ramp entrance. Whether it was scent, movement, or just residual noise, they were converging. Time was running short. We moved fast and quiet, returning by a different route. Maxim rigged a delayed noisemaker behind the exit gate using a keyring alarm and a flashlight coil. A decoy to scatter the infected. When we emerged back onto the street at 7:35, at least 10 of them were less than 20 meters away, jaws slack, torsos twisted at unnatural angles. One turned its head sharply and gave a gurgling rasp that raised the others into full motion. We didn't run. We moved. Jamal opened fire with controlled bursts, dropping 2. Maxim cleared our left flank, nailing a fast-moving one near a bench with a double tap to the skull. I held fire, saving ammunition, guiding Nadia by the elbow as we darted between abandoned vehicles towards the Tucson. At 7:44, we were back on the road. By 8 o'clock, we had returned to the tram depot. Vika met us at the gate, rifle raised, eyes scanning Nadia quickly before waving us in. No questions. She simply nodded and went back to the command post. That was the unspoken language now. No small talk, no comfort, just survival and structure. Once inside, we debriefed. Nadia gave us key details on what had happened between 1 o'clock and 4 o'clock along the southeastern corridor. Military convoys had been ambushed not by sheer numbers, but by speed and misdirection. Infected had learned to follow engine noise, drawn by vibration and heat. One medic had theorized that some retained basic pathfinding instincts, like predatory animals responding to sensory triggers rather than thought. At 8:30, I updated our perimeter protocols. No generator operation during daylight unless shielded underground. No open flame near vents. Movement limited to the western buildings until sundown. We began assigning shifts to conserve energy and monitor stress. Fatigue was setting in, more dangerous than hunger. People snapped more easily. Arguments flared over ration distribution, radio usage, or who got to sleep where. I quashed it early, assigning tasks based on mental stability and giving priority rest slots to those on medical duty or night watch. By 8:50, I took my first real breath in over 12 hours. The depot had held. We had saved someone. We weren't just surviving. We were still human. But the illusion of control is a fragile thing, and in that moment of reprieve, I made a mistake. I allowed myself to believe we had carved out something stable, a foundation to build from. I should have known better. I'd seen how quickly systems collapse, how fast a single oversight can take everything down. That lesson was about to be reinforced. At 9:10, Andrew reported movement near the eastern service gate. He had been monitoring the thermal drone we'd launched half an hour earlier, sweeping the perimeter in concentric patterns. At first, the signal was weak, only one heat signature moving slowly across the adjacent tram line. Then it split. 2 more joined it, then 5, then 10. Within 5 minutes, we were tracking over 20 separate contacts converging on our location, staggered but deliberate. They weren't wandering. They were heading toward us. The infected weren't hunting at random anymore. They were triangulating. I ordered all outer lights disabled and began immediate lock protocols on the eastern and southern sections. Jamal and Maxim took up rooftop positions with scoped rifles. Vika pulled 2 volunteers to reinforce the cargo access ramp with forklift pallets and scrap iron from the rail yard. I directed a 6-person team to start preparing evacuation crates, food, weapons, medical, and to strip all vehicles of unnecessary weight for rapid loading. By 9:30, we had visual contact. The first infected crossed through the overgrown parking lane at the far edge of the depot. It was a woman in a torn janitorial uniform, one eye missing, jaw loose, half dragging a broken foot. But her pace increased the moment she neared the wall, like something primal kicked in. More followed. Silent. Determined. Every 30 seconds, another shape emerged from the tree line beyond the tram line, moving with the same unnatural, twitching focus. There was no time to speculate how they had located us. We had been careful. Heat sources underground, movement limited, noise minimized. But something had drawn them. Maybe scent traces. Maybe residual EM fields from the drone. Or maybe, and far worse to consider, maybe some retained instinct was beginning to link them. Like predators circling prey they could sense but not see. At 9:38, one of them touched the outer gate. A rail-thin man in a hospital gown smeared in dried blood, half his scalp missing. He reached the steel and began clawing softly, fingertips leaving smears. Then another joined him. Then 2 more. In under 2 minutes they were pressing on the steel as a group, slow but persistent. I counted 23 on the front and another 11 shifting toward the south. They hadn't broken through yet, but they would. I had one final decision to make, and no more hours to deliberate. We couldn't wait for a breach. We had to move before it happened, while we still had fuel, bullets, and coordination. I gathered the team in the underground bay, all 11 of us now. We'd lost 2 during the night, one to panic, another to exhaustion-induced error that left a hallway unguarded. I didn't speak of it. We all knew. I pointed to the western access ramp that led to an unused industrial road behind the depot. The route curved west, through an unfinished bypass and into the city's utility corridor system, abandoned drainage lines and maintenance tunnels beneath the former administrative zone. It was a gamble, but it might let us bypass the densest infected zones and reach an elevated railway yard where we could regroup or escape by foot. At 9:50, we initiated Phase 2 evacuation protocol. We moved with mechanical precision. Jamal and Maxim sweeping the exit path ahead, Nadia and another volunteer managing the medical loadout, Andrew disabling equipment and scattering decoys to delay pursuit. Vika stayed by my side, coordinating the drone uplink and manually closing all interior steel doors to prevent re-entry. By 10:10, we were moving down the service ramp in 2 vehicles, the Tucson and the Sprinter, lights off, engines low, weaving through debris toward the backside of the industrial yard. The infected were now massing at the front gate in growing numbers, slamming against the metal with bone and limb, their bodies piling like battering rams. We reached the bypass road within minutes. It was cracked, overgrown with weeds, and half covered in the collapsed scaffolding of a pre-war construction site. But it was passable, for now. At 10:22, our luck cracked. A downed electric pole had fallen across the path. We tried to maneuver the Sprinter around it, but the shoulder had softened from earlier rains. The right front tire dropped into a collapsed drainage trench and stuck. We couldn't push it out. I gave the only order left: abandon the Sprinter. Take the Tucson, strip what we could carry, load the rest onto shoulder rigs and move on foot. We wouldn't make it all the way in a single vehicle, not with this many people, but we could reach the maintenance tunnels within 30 minutes if we kept moving. The group moved with disciplined urgency. No shouting, no hesitation. The infected were now visible through the trees, a slow-moving tide spilling across the access road. Some of them had begun moving faster, sprinting short bursts, mouths slack, arms flailing. The type we had only seen once or twice before, and never in groups. It meant one thing: mutation or adaptation. The theory some of the field medics had floated of neural overcompensation in certain hosts was starting to look more like fact. We reached the tunnel entrance at 10:41. It was a rusted storm drain hatch at the base of a concrete canal, half covered in graffiti and vines. I broke the lock with a crowbar while the others kept watch. The air inside was stale, damp, heavy with rot and mold, but it was enclosed and defensible. We moved down into the darkness. Inside the utility tunnel, the sound of the outside world fell away. Only our breathing and the scrape of boots on old concrete remained. It was just over 2 meters high, with rusted walkways and severed piping along the walls. Emergency marker paint still lined the corridor, Soviet-era arrows and faded stenciling pointing toward old maintenance exits. We advanced slowly, flashlights covered, checking every side shaft and access valve. After 15 minutes, we found a junction chamber, square, windowless, reinforced with thick steel doors once used for flood control. We sealed it behind us. We were safe again. For the moment. At 11:20, I sat on the cold metal floor, back against the curved wall, listening to the others unpack. Someone passed out water. Someone else made a checklist of remaining supplies. I watched Vika inspect a cracked section of the ceiling, her hands steady, her eyes tired but focused. 12 hours ago, we were just a logistics team in a reinforced basement trying to make sense of an emergency. Now, we were the last living witnesses to the collapse of Kharkiv. Maybe the country, maybe more. I turned on the radio, just a whisper of static and the occasional crackle of unknown speech on distant frequencies. There was still no signal from Kiev. No coordination, no response. The central grid was dead. The country's communication lattice had been reduced to whispers in the dark. At 11:55, Maxim handed me a pencil and a folded map. He asked where we'd go next. I didn't have a clear answer yet. But we would go somewhere. We'd follow the rail tunnels if needed, find a fuel cache, link with other survivors, build something new if we had to. Because survival wasn't the end. It was the beginning. At 12 o'clock exactly, I took out my notebook and began to write. Not for orders, not for logistics, but for memory. To record the truth of what happened in those first 12 hours, not for myself, but for anyone who might find it after. I wrote one sentence before closing the book. We didn't break, we adapted. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support keeps these creepypastas coming. Until next time, stay alert, stay safe, and never ignore the feeling that something is watching.